Chapter 107. No, didn't this Duke say it already? His Majesty left everything in my hands, so this Duke is naturally the one making the decisions. Everything can be discussed. Enough benefits were enough to drive someone crazy. Wang Zhen finally couldn't remain calm under the temptation of 40% of benefits. His expression was no longer as aloof as before. Instead, it was one of deep concern. I just don't know how much this 40% will bring me in a month. Oh. If we really get 2 million taels of silver, then after a year, the Immortal Abode and Sky Beyond Heaven's monthly profits should be. 40% should be around 100,000 taels, right? Yang Qindong muttered to himself as he counted on his fingers. Then, he gave Wang Zhen an extremely accurate number. Wang Zhen's left eye twitched when he heard that he could get 100,000 taels of silver in a month. This number was already more than what he could get from all the other businesses combined. Didn't that mean that as long as he had Yang Qindong's support, he would have an endless supply of money to spend? He could do as many things as he wanted. Of course, Wang Zhen also knew that there was no such thing as a free lunch in this world. If he wanted to achieve this, he would have to pay a great price. At the very least, he would have to fork out 2 million taels of silver right now. The question was, did Wang Zhen have it? The answer was obvious. Of course he did. After all these years of plundering and poking around, he had already accumulated quite a bit of savings. Even though he was still a bit short of 2 million taels of silver, with his charisma, he would be able to quickly make up for it. Then, should he give it to Yang Qindong? Or should he trust him? Wang Zhen was deep in thought as he considered the feasibility of this step. Yang Qindong looked like he was regretting something with his head lowered, but in reality, he had been watching this arrogant fellow from the corner of his eye. When he saw that he seemed to be thinking about something, he decided to add fuel to the fire. He immediately took the initiative to say, "Eunuch, you don't think that 100,000 taels of silver a month is impossible to achieve, right? Let me tell you, we've only seen the Immortal Abode. Relying on it won't work. However, once Heavens Beyond opens for business, the benefits will be unimaginable. This is because the things we sell are not even available in the Ming Dynasty. Small items such as soap, toilet paper, diapers, toothbrushes, toothpaste, perfume, various kinds of canned fish, chong sam, and various kinds of women's underwear. Large items such as glass, various kinds of exquisite glass cups, and even the divine mirror in the palace can be bought as long as one is willing to spend money. Think about it, these items are only available to grandmasters. Wouldn't the price be decided by us? I'm afraid that 40% of the monthly profit would be more than 100,000 taels of silver. Wang Zhen had been listening attentively. Most of the things mentioned earlier were things that he had only heard of recently. Once they were circulated in the market, they would undoubtedly be popular goods. When he heard that there was even a godly item for sale, he was completely relieved. He was very optimistic about the future of Sky Beyond Heaven. When Yang Qindong mentioned that 40% of the monthly profit would be more than 100,000 taels of silver, it was Wang Zhen's turn to slap the table and say, "Fine, then 200,000 taels of silver a month it is." This Duke can guarantee that no taxes will be collected, and will also inject 2 million taels of silver into Sky Beyond Heaven and the Immortal Abode. After a year, you will return the 2 million taels of silver to me, and at the same time, give me a monthly profit of 200,000 taels. Wang Zhen's tone was extremely resolute, as if he had made a decision. He was like a gambler. After he finished speaking, his eyes, which were slightly red from excitement, fell on Yang Qindong, as if waiting for his reply. That's not a problem. Yang Qindong saw that the wolf had fallen into the trap. How could he hesitate in the slightest? Not only did he immediately agree, he even said that he could immediately sign a contract. If he couldn't, then the Immortal Abode and Sky Beyond Heaven would all belong to Wang Zhen. Seeing Yang Qindong so confident, Wang Zhen was completely relieved. Whether it was the immortal abode or sky beyond heaven, they were both the sixth young master's painstaking efforts. If he dared to bet even that, then he was naturally trustworthy. Ha ha ha, Dong Shuai is indeed a straightforward person. Since that's the case, then you just need to sign the contract and wait for my 2 million taels of silver to enter your account. Wang Zhen was so happy that he even called out Dong Shuai's name. From Yang Shima to the sixth young master to the current Dong Shuai, it was clear that Wang Zhen's impression of Yang Chendong was changing step by step. His impression of him was growing with each passing day. Speaking of which, Wang Zhen was only blindly taking money. Even if something happened to the immortal abode, he would only receive a little less income. It wouldn't hurt him at all. But now, that was no longer the case. If he invested 2 million taels of silver, then he would have to pay a price. Whether it was the immortal abode or sky beyond heaven, they would all become part of his businesses. How could he afford to be careless or sloppy? As for Yang Chendong, Crimson City's development speed was unimaginable. After conquering Flag Mountain in the southwest of Ryukyu Island, there was nothing to worry about. It was only a matter of time before they could fully develop. Add to that the strength of the navy, and the amount of protection fees they collected every day could be described as 10,000 taels of silver a day. He really didn't lack this 2 million taels of silver, but he still forced Wang Zhen to spend so much money. He just wanted him to face this problem head-on, and put in more effort. Now that Wang Zhen was willing to fork out 2 million taels of silver, it proved that he had invested a lot. He definitely wouldn't allow anything to happen to his businesses. This was what Yang Chendong wanted to see. As for the 200,000 taels of silver a year from now? Wang Zhen would have to live until then for that to happen. The two of them really hit it off, and the matter was settled just like that. When they drank the tea, it seemed to have become much more fragrant. Seeing that Wang Zhen seemed to be in a good mood, Yang Chendong took the opportunity to raise two questions. The first was about who had caused this morning's incident. If they didn't find the mastermind behind it, there would likely be more of this kind of trouble in the future. They couldn't just passively take a beating, could they? The second question was about Yu Qian. He had proposed that the immortal abode pay taxes. Although this matter had been handed over to Wang Zhen, and there wasn't much of a problem, as long as he lived, he would have to keep an eye on them. Wouldn't that mean that they would have to guard against thieves for 1,000 days? Presumably, everyone would be in a lot of pain. Since he had reached an agreement with Yang Chendong, and had even given him a large sum of money, there were some things that Wang Zhen naturally wouldn't hide from him. He had his own thoughts on these two matters, and told the sixth young master about them. I've already investigated the matter. Sun Qing, Dong Kund, and the other censors impeaching you was Xisheng's doing behind the scenes. He was the one who leaked the news to the censors. These people have their responsibilities, so of course they would take action now that they have an excuse. Wang Zhen shook his head lightly as he spoke, a look of resentment on his face. Last time, Xisheng had slashed Yang Chendong with a blade. Originally, he should have been punished, and it wouldn't have been excessive even if he had been killed. However, it was precisely because of him that the sixth young master didn't pursue the matter. At that time, he had even promised that the two of them wouldn't interfere with each other's business in the future. But now, he had already made a move. Wasn't this the same as slapping him, the middleman, in the face? Yang Chendong's expression changed. He had already investigated the ins and outs of the matter last night, and now, he had thrown the question to Wang Zhen in order to hide it. Now, he acted as if this was the first time he had heard of such a matter, and said angrily, "This Xisheng is really too much of a bully." Yang Chendong's anger was within Wang Zhen's expectations, so he wasn't surprised at all. Instead, he comforted him, "Dong Shuai, this matter isn't just a slap to your face, it is also a slap to this duke's face. Don't worry, I will give you an explanation for this matter. This guild will arrange and persuade Xisheng to leave the capital, what do you think?" "Leave the capital?" Yang Chendong pretended to be puzzled as he asked. Yes, leave the capital. Xisheng's position is that of 1,000 households of the embroidered uniform guard, and he will use this as an excuse to monitor the officials outside the capital. As for when he will return, we'll decide based on his performance, all right? Wang Zhen said with a smile, as if he was negotiating with Wang Zhen. Leaving the capital was naturally to toss out the problem and not cause trouble for the immortal abode and realm beyond heaven. As for when he would return, that would depend on Yang Qindong's performance. If he performed well and the two sides were satisfied with the cooperation, then he naturally wouldn't return to the capital. But if Yang Qindong wanted to play some tricks, then he would just summon him back, and Wang Zhen would just have to sit on the mountain and watch the tigers fight. Wang Zhen thought that he had a shrewd plan, but he didn't know that this was exactly what Yang Qindong was thinking. Xisheng was a member of the embroidered uniform guard, and he also had a powerful eunuch brother like Xining. Making a move against him in the capital would naturally cause a great deal of trouble, and Yang Qindong would find it difficult to make a move against him. But things were different outside the capital. The heavens were high and the emperor was far away, so it was perfectly normal for something to happen to anyone. Alright, then let's do as eunuch says. Yang Qindong appeared to be in deep thought as he nodded his head in agreement. And the second problem? How do you want to deal with Yu Qian? This person is a tough nut to crack. I won't hide it from you, Dong Shuai. This duke had wanted to deal with him before, but he was unmoved by force or persuasion. As an official, he is extremely honest. Moreover, there are many people who are willing to speak up for him. This has given this duke quite a headache. As he spoke, he rubbed his forehead. Wang Zhen truly didn't know what to do with Yu Qian. Yang Qindong had naturally heard about how Wang Zhen had captured Yu Qian and imprisoned him, only to be helplessly released later, from the Bureau of Security. He naturally knew that Wang Zhen wasn't trying to shirk responsibility, but that he truly had no other choice. Thus, he nodded, then pretended to have suddenly thought of something. Since Yu Qian can't do anything to him in the capital, why don't we just send him out of the capital like we did with Xisheng? Isn't he the left assistant minister of the Bureau of Military Personnel? Have someone investigate the situation of the various guard stations in the country. This way, what the eye doesn't see, the heart doesn't grieve over. Chapter 108. Upon hearing Yang Qindong's idea, Wang Zhen's eyes lit up. Not bad, this is a good idea, but he'll still come back in the end. Wang Zhen lightly shook his head when he realized that this wasn't a permanent solution. It's fine. He'll leave one day at a time, and who knows what kind of situation he'll be in when he returns? When that time comes, we'll think of something else. After all, if we make a move against him now, it will implicate too many people and cause too much trouble, Yang Qindong said, appearing to fear Yu Qian very much. These words were precisely what Wang Zhen was worried about. He was also afraid of Yu Qian, or else he would have made a move long ago. Thinking that there was truly no better idea at the moment and that sending Yu Qian away would be a way to alleviate the situation, Wang Zhen nodded. Okay. Let's do as you say. The atmosphere of this second official meeting was much better than the first. When Wang Zhen decided to invest 2 million taels of silver, he had completely stepped onto Yang Qindong's boat. The only difference was that he was the one on the boat, and this was tantamount to placing his life in the other party's hands. It was just that he was completely unaware of it. In the end, Wang Zhen left the Yang clan manor in satisfaction. Not long after, Yu Qian and Xisheng were transferred out of the capital. At the same time, the 2 million taels of silver were sent in batches to the newly opened Heavens Beyond Trading Company. There was already a dazzling array of goods here. There were many goods in Heavens Beyond, and they were constantly being shipped in from Crimson City. But when they were operating, they would always tell the merchants who came to purchase that there was a shortage of goods, so they had no choice but to sell in limited quantities. The purpose of this so-called limited quantity was to trick the eager consumers into buying, or else there would be no more. In other words, there wasn't enough supply, and there would be a mad scramble. In other words, there was a limit to how many goods could be sold each day. For example, glass. Each piece was 6 by 6, and only 1,000 pieces could be sold each day. The price was set by the highest bidder, and the items would be sold to the highest bidder. As for the others, they would have to wait until the next day. There were also glass cups, perfume, toilet paper, and other items. They were limited every day, so there were always a lot of people who needed them. There were very few goods, which made everything a hot commodity. And all of this followed the principle of bidding, the highest bidder wins. There were also divine items like mirrors, which were not only limited in quantity, but would only appear once every 3 days. Because of this, countless merchants fought over them, and there were also many people who tried to establish relations with the Yang family. Things like getting in through the back door happened from time to time. Since ancient times, sellers had always set the standard of being able to sell their goods. In fact, the more they sold, the better it would be. However, those who came to collect their goods would always sell them at a lower price. However, when they reached the heavens beyond heaven, they did the exact opposite. Do you want the goods? Then, he would just offer a high price. Do you want more goods? Not only was there no discount on the price, but on the contrary, the price might be even higher. It was not impossible to monopolize the market, but one would need sufficient funds to do so. It must be said that when the heavens beyond heaven played this game, many merchants hated it, but there was nothing they could do. Outside the heavens beyond heaven, there were always the figures of the Eastern faction guards and the brocade guards. If someone dared to cause trouble, they would immediately be arrested. If they did not pay a large sum of hard-earned money, they would not be able to leave. The merchants did not dare to cause trouble, and could only play according to the rules of the heavens beyond heaven. As a result, a large amount of gold and silver flowed into the hands of Yang Chendong, and his funds became incomparably huge. Now, when he received goods from the Tianjin port, the receiver was also responsible for the task of delivering the money. It was really a pleasure. There were also some merchants who, seeing the heavens beyond heaven making so much money, gave birth to other thoughts. They wanted to get their own ships to travel the sea. Although there were some risks, if they succeeded and brought back the foreign goods, they would definitely make a fortune. However, how could they know that the great Ming Dynasty's sea region had already been taken over by Yang Chendong? Those merchant ships that went out to buy goods were often intercepted by Gao Xiong's navy not long after they left the sea. Then, they would be captured along with the money. That was truly a profitable business. Just from this, who knew how much Yang Chendong had earned? In truth, the order to seal off the sea region was given by Yang Chendong, but Gao Xiong himself was not the one who carried it out. Gao Xiong had long lost interest in dealing with the unarmed and defenseless Ming Dynasty merchants, and handed these matters to his assistant Yu Guang. He was together with Leng Song, discussing the matter of attacking Deer Port. After taking down Qishan and dealing with the threat at the southwest rear of Qiqian City, the Yang family's new army took over Mount Ali and Mount Yu, taking over a large portion of Taichung. They also suppressed the enemy's forces near Taichung, and Deer Port became the first military stronghold facing the front lines. Deer Port. It was the biggest port in the entire Little Ryukyu country. The terrain here was great, and the coastline was also really smooth, allowing large numbers of ships to be parked there. Furthermore, its location was close to the Little Ryukyu Ocean region, making it difficult for others to suddenly attack. As such, it became a natural harbor base. As the highest-ranking officer of the new army, Gao Xiong had been drooling over this place and wanted to take it for himself. If not for the fact that they lacked manpower, he would have had such thoughts long ago. Now that Deng Maoqi and Fu Zhen had been killed, and the uprising army there was suppressed by the Ming army, Leng Song, who was unable to take advantage of the situation, could only bring his men back to Qiqian City. This allowed the military power in the city to be strengthened. Leng Song's gains from the Fu Zhen trip were huge. The 100 Ling vanguard and 500 support troops that he brought won many battles. In the end, no one died, and only 7 were injured. Moreover, their injuries were not serious. They did not have many casualties, and this was naturally due to the hard work and strictness of their training. After a few months of hard work, the results were also gratifying. They brought back more than 150,000 people from the Great Ming Dynasty, and they obtained countless resources such as gunpowder. With the addition of these Han Chinese, the problem of manpower was alleviated to a certain extent. After another serious and strict examination, He Yang, Song Deshang, and the other instructors did not dare to go easy on them. Every support soldier that wanted to officially become a member of the Ling Vanguard had to go through both physical and cultural tests. Only when their results were good or above could they become a regular soldier. However, because there were too many people waiting to be selected, the number of people who passed the examination this time was even more than the previous times combined. There were actually more than 600 people who passed the final examination. With so many new Ling Vanguard joining at once, Gao Xiong and Ling Song discussed and expanded the army, forming a total of 12 companies, with 100 people in each company. These people were then divided into 4 battalions, with 2 battalions for the navy and the army, making 6 companies. With the expansion of the Ling Vanguard, Gao Xiong and Ling Song's horizons were broadened, and they set their sights on Deer Harbor. They wanted to deal with the problem of Taichung in one go and deal a heavy blow to the No. 1 Shang dynasty. Now that they had a target, what came next was all sorts of investigations and infiltrations. According to the teachings of the 6th young master, before every battle, the most mature performance was to understand everything about the enemy. If there was enough time, it was best to know who the enemy's commander was. What kind of personality they had, what kind of fighting style they would use, had to be understood clearly. Only then could they achieve the greatest victory with the smallest price. Yang Chendong's words had always been treated as the truth in the new army. The investigations began, and the battle plan to attack Deer Harbor began to take shape. Xisheng left, and so did Yu Qian. In the capital, Yang Chendong seemed to have calmed down a lot after the departure of the two. All he could see were the guests of the immortal abode and the merchants of the realm beyond heaven. For the time being, Yang Chendong didn't pay too much attention to these things that he had been preparing for a long time. He knew that as long as everything went according to plan, he would definitely earn enough money and gain enough popularity. Since he didn't need to spend too much effort on these things, what came next was to deal with those people who had caused trouble for him. In the study of the 6th young master of the Yang clan manor, there were 3 pieces of paper. These were 3 sets of information sent over by the Bureau of Security. They were information on the left Assistant Minister of the Bureau of Military Personnel Yu Qian, 1000 Commander Xisheng of the Embroidered Uniform Guard, and Imperial Censor Shen Yu of the Sichuan Dao. What Yang Chendong didn't expect was that not only did Wang Jin chase Yu Qian and Xisheng out of the capital, he even chased Shen Yu of the Sichuan Dao, who had returned to the capital to report on his work. These 2 are talents. If you want to keep them, send them to Crimson City. Tell Gao Xiong and Ling Song to arrange for people to keep an eye on them 24 hours a day. They can go and see everything, but they can't leave or do anything. After handing over the information on Yu Qian and Shen Yu to Tiger's Mane, Yang Chendong's expression hardened. He looked at the information on Xisheng on the last piece of paper and said, "As for this person, take care of him on the spot. But do it cleanly, and no one can see any problems. Can you do it?" "Yes." Tiger's Mane excitedly replied. Then he leaned forward and asked, "Young master, can I personally take care of this matter?" "No." Yang Chendong decisively shook his head. "You are this young master's subordinate. Everyone knows that. If you disappear at this time, people will inevitably become suspicious. How about this, let Dao Zhao's group take care of this matter. Don't they complain every day that they have nothing to do? If this matter fails, then they can just return to Crimson City and become a supporting soldier. If they want to join the Cold Front, they will have to face even more difficult and stringent tests. Seeing how straightforward Yang Chendong was, Tiger's Mane knew that there was no chance for him to take advantage of this matter. He immediately stood at attention and replied, "Young master, please rest assured. This matter will be handled beautifully." Chapter 109. Nanjing's Yangzhou Prefecture, as the capital of the Ming Dynasty and now a subsidiary capital, this place was still bustling with activity. Moreover, the climate was pleasant, so much of the Ming Dynasty's wealth had been gathered here. Yangzhou Prefecture was the most prosperous of all places. Not only were there all sorts of goods, but because the heavens were high and the emperor was far away, the entertainment industry was also very developed. Xisheng and his 10 brothers were enjoying themselves here. He had originally wanted to annoy Yang Chendong a little, so he had his brothers send a message to the imperial censors. This had led to the impeachment of Yang Chendong in the imperial court, which had led to the emperor imposing taxes on the immortal abode, allowing him to vent some of his anger. But soon after, he suffered the consequences of his own actions. Because he had acted on his own initiative, he had incurred the wrath of Wang Zhen. He had left the capital this time to avoid the storm. In his big brother's words, he should leave the capital and have some fun. Once he was tired and the capital was calm, he would naturally be called back. Knowing that this was the result of his big brother's compromise with Wang Zhen, Xisheng obediently left the capital and came to Yangzhou, a place of pleasant weather and romance. As soon as he entered this place, Xisheng had the feeling of a dragon entering the sea. He brought a dozen brothers to eat and drink every day, which was very comfortable. At night, he would find a very famous local flower to sleep. It was really like being a groom every day, living like an immortal. But all of this would come to an end tonight, because Dao Shao had personally come, and with him were 3 of Lingfeng's brothers. All of them were extremely skilled in firearms. Dao Shao had taken on 3 missions this time: kill Xisheng, capture Yu Qian, and capture Shen Yu. He had assigned 3 of his brothers to each of the last 2 missions. Yu Qian was just a scholar without the strength to truss a chicken, so sending 3 of his brothers was already giving them face. As for Xisheng's mission, he had to do it himself. Although Xisheng had injured the 6th young master, which had been part of the plan, the guards had still been dissatisfied. Based on what they had said, if anyone offended the 6th young master, they should just kill them. What was the point of trying to injure themselves to gain the enemy's confidence? However, this was an order personally given by the 6th young master. As soldiers, it was their duty to obey orders, so there was nothing they could say. Now that he had the opportunity, how could he let Xisheng go so easily? After entering Yangzhou, he quickly met up with the person in charge of the security bureau. After finding out where Xisheng was going tonight and which entertainer he had taken a fancy to, Dao Shao quickly started making plans. In Dao Zhao's words, since this brat likes women so much, then let him die on a woman's belly. With a general direction in mind, the next step was to make various preparations, as well as various disguises and infiltrations. He had experienced this many times in the past when he entered the Cold Peak trial, so naturally, he was extremely familiar with it. Very quickly, one of his subordinates took on the role of a pimp, another was in charge of keeping watch, and another was in charge of receiving and retreating. Naturally, the matter of attacking Xisheng was left to Dao Shao. He was playing with a bottle of medicine in his hand. These were all aphrodisiacs. After taking them, even if he was facing a sow, he would not be able to control himself. He wanted to see Xisheng's wonderful performance tonight. The sky was dark. As expected, Xisheng led a group of subordinates into the ambush that Dao Shao had prepared beforehand. Once he entered, he could not wait to find the room of the star of the place, the lady called Sai Tian Xian, and walked in. However, the moment he entered the room, a pimp followed behind him. At this moment, Xisheng was anxiously taking off his clothes and was about to get on the bed to wait for the lady's arrival. Suddenly, he heard movement behind him, and the footsteps did not belong to a lady. Out of habit, he drew his spring-embroidered saber. "Dear customer, don't be nervous. I'm here to give you medicine. After taking these things, I guarantee that you will be more energetic. A night as a bridegroom only costs 1 tael of silver. It's cheap, right?" The pimp did not show any fear when facing Xisheng, who was holding a saber. Instead, he walked forward to promote the things in his hands. Originally, when he saw that it was a pimp who came in, Xisheng thought that he was too nervous. Especially when he heard that the other party was promoting pills, he did not take the other party seriously. Instead, he waved his hand and said, "Get out of here. This young master's body is very good. I don't need those things." The pimp should have left after he finished speaking. However, he did not expect that the other party would take another step forward. At the same time, he kept saying, "Dear customer, my medicine is really good. If you don't try it, you'll regret it. Get out." Seeing that the pimp was actually getting closer to him, Xisheng was a little angry. The other party had disturbed his elegance. Even if he killed the other party here, it would not be a big deal. It would just be a lowly record. After he killed the other party, he would just have to report it to the local authorities. The spring-embroidered saber was raised high, as if it would fall at any time. However, the pimp standing opposite him was not afraid at all. Instead, he opened his mouth and said, "Dear customer, you are being unreasonable. I brought you something out of kindness. If you don't want it, just don't want it. Why do you have to fight?" The pimp's calmness gave Xisheng a bad feeling. However, he could not figure out what was wrong. While he was hesitating, he suddenly felt a strong wind coming from behind. Instinctively, he wanted to turn around. However, because his attention was on the pimp, he needed time to turn around. Just as he turned around, he suddenly felt a sharp pain in his neck. Then, he fainted on the ground. Dao Shao appeared behind Xisheng. Looking at the unconscious man, he shook his head and said, "Such a lack of vigilance. I don't know how you became a Jianghu of the embroidered uniform guard." After saying this, Dao Shao angrily said to the man who acted as the pimp, "Chen Gang, how did you act? You did not show the slightest bit of fear. You almost alerted him. Do you know that if he shouted outside, our plan would have failed?" "Yes, Captain, please calm down. I was also angry when I saw Xisheng. How could I have thought of pretending to be afraid?" The subordinate called Chen Gang hurriedly admitted his mistake. He was afraid that Dao Shao would continue to scold him on this issue, so he said, "Captain, let's hurry up. That Cai Tianxian has gone to take a bath. I'm afraid she will be back soon." "Oh, right." Only then did Dao Shao remember that this place was not safe. It was also not the time to make a conclusion. He nodded and let Chen Gang help the unconscious Xisheng up. Then, Dao Shao poured all the pills in the bottle into Xisheng's mouth. After Xisheng drank some water, he completely digested the pills. Then, he carried Xisheng back to the bed. One of them left through the window while the other left through the door. After a short while, Cai Tianxian, who had just finished her bath, entered the room. When she saw that Xisheng was already on the bed, she couldn't help but reveal a coquettish look on her face. Then, she swayed her hips and walked to the bed. She had just taken off her clothes when Xisheng woke up. The first thing he saw was Cai Tianxian, who looked like a little white rabbit. His eyes turned red and he pounced on her. Then, there was a loud shaking sound from the wooden bed. Xisheng was dead. The next morning, when the subordinates saw that the Jianghu had not come out of the room, they knocked on the door and entered. The first thing they saw was Xisheng lying dead on the bed with his eyes wide open. Cai Tianxian had also died with him. She had been tortured to death. His subordinate hurriedly did a checkup and concluded that Jianghu she had died of natural causes due to consuming too much aphrodisiac. Immediately, the news was sent to the Xining eunuch in the capital with the express speed of 600 li. At the same time that Xisheng died, the left assistant minister of the Bureau of Military Personnel and Imperial Censor Shen Yu appeared on a ship. That ship was sailing through the sea, and its destination was Crimson City. Isn't this Imperial Censor Shen? Why are you here? Looking at the boundless ocean around him, then looking at his former colleague, Yu Qian's eyes widened, his face filled with curiosity and confusion. I don't know. This lowly official only took a nap. When I opened my eyes, I was already here. Shen Yu shook his head, a confused look on his face. It seems like we've been kidnapped. Yu Qian was smart and immediately understood his situation. At this moment, he saw a man dressed in camouflage clothes standing not far away. He shouted, "Hey, who are you? Why did you kidnap this official and imperial censor Shen? Do you know that we're very poor? We don't have any money, and no one will come to ransom us." Yu Qian truly didn't have any money. This point made him feel much more at ease. He really wanted to say that they had captured the wrong people and that they were useless. However, no matter how much Yu Qian shouted, the only response he got was the crashing and slapping of the waves. The soldier not far away seemed to have not heard his shouts and continued to stand there. He would occasionally glance in their direction, preventing them from jumping into the sea. Yu Qian and Shen Yu naturally wouldn't seek death. They wouldn't die before they figured out what was going on. But they also sadly discovered that they didn't know where they were. Where was the ship heading? What would the future hold? They only knew that they had left the Great Ming Dynasty and their future was uncertain. The immortal abode and sky beyond heaven were still very popular. Every day, people would line up to eat and stock up. This was especially true for the immortal abode. It was already the 12th month, and the weather was getting colder and colder. More and more people began to wear cotton robes on the streets. However, no matter how cold it was outside, the immortal abode was still as warm as spring all year round. Some of the private rooms even had to open their windows to let in some warm air. All of this was naturally because of the stove. Chapter 110. Yang Chendong had already considered the problem of the capital's climate. When the immortal abode was first built, he had hired craftsmen to install a large number of furnaces in the mezzanine. Once the weather turned cold and the coals were ignited, the heat would naturally dissipate. The guests quickly noticed that the immortal abode was as warm as spring. After asking around, they learned that it was because of the furnaces. Speaking of which, this sort of invisible heating method was far superior to placing a brazier in one's home. Many people immediately asked if they could pay the craftsmen of the immortal abode to install the furnaces in their homes. This was a business that Yang Chendong had originally planned to make money, so the staff very politely agreed. But because there were only a limited number of craftsmen and limited materials, not only was the installation extremely expensive, they also had to wait in line. But for the sake of keeping their homes as warm as spring, many people paid up and waited in line. This matter quickly spread, and the Minister of Works, Shi Pu, paid a visit to the Yang clan manor. The potatoes had been harvested long ago, and the seeds had been distributed. The embroidered uniform guard and Eastern Depot soldiers could no longer be seen outside the Yang clan manor. But even so, no one dared to cause trouble here. This was because all signs indicated that Yang Shima had an extremely good relationship with eunuch Wang Zhen. The two would meet from time to time and converse for several hours at a time. With Wang Zhen as the flag, who would be stupid enough to take the initiative to find trouble with Yang Chendong? Although Shi Pu was the Minister of Works, a second-rank official in the imperial court, he was still nothing in front of Wang Zhen. Not only did he not want to offend Wang Zhen, but Minister Shi even got his current position because of Wang Zhen's relationship. Naturally, he had to be extremely polite to Yang Chendong. He couldn't just send an order like he would any other official, so he decided to personally come. Yang Chendong attached great importance to Shi Pu's visit. His father, Yang Rong, had once been the Minister of Works, so their relationship was quite close. When Pu arrived and entered the main hall of the Yang clan manor, he was greeted by a wave of hot air, but he couldn't see a single brazier burning. He immediately knew that this place had to have been installed with furnaces. He couldn't help but say with envy, "Honorable nephew, your place really is like a paradise of immortals." Ha ha ha. Yang Chendong clasped his fist in the direction of the capital, a solemn expression on his face. "Uncle Shi praises me too much. This is all thanks to His Majesty's governance, allowing the realm to be at peace and the common people to live and work in peace." "That's right, His Majesty is quite diligent." Pu laughed. The current Ming dynasty looked strong and prosperous, but that was just the capital left behind by Ren Xuanji. When it came to Zhu Qizhen, he put eunuchs in important positions. These court officials, these representatives of Confucianism, were no longer as strong as they used to be. However, Pu wouldn't tell Yang Chendong these things in depth. After all, he was just a junior and didn't deserve any deeper guidance. Listening to Pu's nonchalant words, Yang Chendong chuckled without saying a word. "Uncle Shi, you didn't come here today just to chat with me, right?" "Huh, of course not. Let's not beat around the bush. This time, I'm here for the furnace wall. You see, such a good thing should be shared with everyone." Pu chuckled as if he was working for the country. When it came to serious matters, Yang Chendong's expression became awkward. "What's wrong? Does honorable nephew have some difficulty?" Seeing Yang Chendong's hesitant appearance, Pu felt that this matter wasn't as simple as he had imagined. "Yes." Yang Chendong finally nodded his head and explained, "I won't hide it from Uncle Shi. When I first made this furnace wall, it was just an idea. Later on, I invested a great deal of manpower and resources to understand the principles. For this matter, Eunuch Wang also invested a great deal of money. Now that he has a share of the furnace wall, if I were to give it away for no good reason, I'm afraid that even if I agree, there will be others who won't." By raising Wang Zhen's name, Pu was using his influence to suppress others. Looking at Pu's appearance, it was clear that he wanted Yang Chendong to contribute the method of constructing the furnace wall for free. This was something that Yang Chendong couldn't accept. In the society of that time, there was no such thing as property rights. This was especially true for craftsmen. No matter how hard they worked or how much they invested, once they made something good, it would be promoted for free. As for the creator, he wouldn't receive any benefits. At most, the higher-ups would praise him verbally, but in terms of material benefits, there was nothing. This was because from everyone's point of view, the things you made should be contributed. Since it was contributed, why should there be any benefits? Under the heavens, all good things should belong to the emperor, and not a method for personal gain. This seemed to allow more people to benefit, but in reality, it was extremely unfair to the creator. He spent money, time, and talent to make something that was easily used by others. His investment and output weren't proportional at all. In the long run, who would waste time to create something? Even if they didn't create something, they would still receive money. This kind of unfair treatment caused everyone to gradually lose their creativity. Now, Pu was asking for this craftsmanship as if he was an ordinary craftsman. Since he was born and lived in the Great Ming Dynasty, then the things he made should also belong to the Great Ming Dynasty. Therefore, he should give it all to her. He was against this kind of working method in his heart, but he couldn't say it out loud. Why was everyone else like this, but only she was special? Therefore, Yang Chendong could only use Wang Zhen's name to suppress others. A while ago, the left assistant minister of the Ministry of War, Yu Qian, and the Sichuan imperial censor, Shen Yu, suddenly disappeared without a trace. No one knew if they were alive, and no one knew if they were dead. When this matter came out, everyone's suspicions were pointed at Wang Zhen. This was because these two people had all kinds of conflicts with Eunuch Wang. Now that they both disappeared, was there anyone else other than Wang Zhen who had this kind of ability? However, there was no evidence, so no one could do anything to Wang Zhen. They could only secretly guard against him. Now that the name was taken out, even Sherpu's expression turned ugly after hearing it. Before he came, he thought that Yang Chendong might not be willing to hand over the craftsmanship, but it didn't matter. He only needed to move him with emotion and reason. After all, he was still a fifth-rank official in the imperial court, so he should have this kind of awareness, right? However, when Wang Zhen's name came out, Sherpu instantly lost his temper. Then, other than buying, is there no other way? Sherpu knew that forcing Wang Zhen to hand over the craftsmanship wouldn't work, so he tried to ask. This, logically speaking, is not possible. Yang Chendong shook his head. However, when Sherpu's face turned gloomy, he continued, however, since Uncle Sher has personally come, I still have to give you face. How about this, your Ministry of Works can provide copper in exchange for me sending someone to make the fireplace. How about it? Nowadays, most of the fireplaces in the market were made of copper and iron, and some of the parts were very delicate. For example, things like the screws were far from what the Ministry of Works could make. If he were to copy them, it was very likely that the quality of the product wouldn't be up to standard, resulting in all sorts of problems. Once a fire broke out, it would be a huge problem. It was precisely because of the uniqueness of this technology that the cost of installation was extremely high, to the point that ordinary officials couldn't accept it. As a result, many officials went to find Sherpu and said that since he was in charge of the Ministry of Works, this matter was within his jurisdiction. How to install the fireplace in everyone's homes should be his responsibility. In the end, these officials just didn't want to spend so much money to enjoy the benefits of the fireplace. Now, Yang Chendong gave a compromise. The technology couldn't be taught, but it could be exchanged with copper. This way, with the large amount of copper in the Ministry of Works warehouse, the problem of installing the fireplace could be solved. It could also be considered as solving Sherpu's urgent problem. Okay, then I'll thank nephew. Knowing that Yang Chendong was giving him face, Sherpu immediately said it as if he was afraid that the other party would go back on his word. Afterwards, the two of them discussed the amount of copper needed to exchange for a fireplace. During this time, Yang Chendong naturally demanded an exorbitant price. Although Sherpu felt that it was a bit high, he thought about how those things were temporarily useless in the warehouse, so he might as well exchange them for benefits first. If there was a shortage, he could just collect them from all over the country. Thus, he agreed. In the end, Sherpu left Yangjia Manor with a satisfied expression. After he left, when Xiao Yin came to clean up the tea, she asked Yang Chendong with curiosity and confusion, "Young master? Since he brought out Wang Zhen's name, why did he agree to exchange copper? This way, won't we earn a lot less money?" Our Yin also knows how to use her brain to think about problems. Yang Chendong said with a big smile. "Young master. Yin has always used her brain. It's just that I'm not as smart as you, so I can't see it." Xiao Yin said somewhat coquettishly. Ever since the relationship between the two of them became real, in front of Yang Chendong, she became more and more like a little girl. "Right, young master, you still haven't said why." "Why?" Yang Chendong looked into the distance and was silent for a while before replying. "Even Yin said that I used Wang Zhen's name to scare people. I'm sure the others would think the same, right?" This wasn't what the young master wanted to see. This time, he would let the Ministry of Works arrange the exchange of copper for furnace walls. Firstly, it would serve more people, and secondly, it would be a way to express goodwill to them, so that they wouldn't hate the young master like they hated Wang Zhen. Of course, the most important point is that Qiqian City lacks copper. The industry there is developing too quickly, especially the military factories and shipyards. As more and more advanced products are put into production, the shortage will only increase. Chapter 111. Although Gao Xiong and the others robbed at sea and obtained quite a bit of gold and silver, who would bring copper onto the ship? Now that we have obtained so much copper, we can solve their problem. This is something that no amount of silver can solve. Yang Qindong's explanation and reply allowed Xiao Yin to understand. She immediately said happily, "So you're saying that we've profited this time?" "Of course we've profited." Yang Qindong also smiled and nodded. In his heart, he thought that if it wasn't for the fact that Sherpu and the others couldn't see the importance of copper, they wouldn't have succeeded so easily this time. Sherpu had made a trip to the Yang clan manor and then transported quite a bit of copper to exchange for ready-made fireplaces. For a moment, this had alleviated the officials' need for fireplaces and received praise from the officials. This had also improved Yang Qindong's reputation among the officials. Before this, there were still a few officials who had installed fireplaces in advance, such as the direct relatives of the Yang clan and the Hu clan. In the Hu clan, no matter how cold it was outside, it was like spring all year round in here. Naturally, this was all thanks to the installation of the fireplaces. We're all thanks to young Mississippi. In the bedroom, Xiaoqing, who was still wearing her summer clothes, giggled as she looked at young Miss Hu Yan who was dressing up in front of the dressing table. Her eyes narrowed into slits as she smiled. "Xiaoqing, you're asking for a beating." Hearing the maidservant teasing her, Hu Yan, whose face was slightly red, turned around and raised her arm as if to hit Xiaoqing. Xiaoqing had already jumped far away and was still giggling as she said, "Young miss still won't admit it? Look at those important officials who haven't installed a fireplace. Even those dukes' manors who spent a lot of money still have to wait in line. Yet, our Hu clan didn't do anything and installed everything that should be installed. Also, the mirror in young Mrs. room, the perfume, the glass on the window, which one of them isn't priceless and is limited in supply. Yet, you can see them all here. What does the East Marshal want? Everyone in the capital knows, so how could young Miss not know?" Knowing that she wouldn't be able to hit Xiaoqing, Hu Yan simply returned to her chair. She shook her unkempt hair and said, "You all know, but why hasn't he come to propose marriage? It's going to be the new year soon, and I'll be 17 years old. Ah. So young Miss was looking forward to a marriage proposal. You really don't know shame." After little Qing heard this, she skipped over again. "Alright, little Qing, I'm talking business with you. You said that he treats me so well, and the whole family can see it, but why didn't he ask for my hand in marriage? What is he waiting for?" Hu Yan said with a bitter smile. Many 16-year-old girls were already married. However, Yang Qindong didn't even propose marriage, which made her a little uncertain. "I don't know." Once they started talking about serious matters, little Qing regained her serious look and shook her head vigorously. However, she quickly nodded and said, "If we don't know, we can find someone to ask. Isn't young Miss often in contact with big sister Yang? Why don't we find an opportunity to ask her and let her ask her brother? It shouldn't be a problem, right?" "Yes." Hu Yan nodded, thinking that little Qing's idea was not bad. In her mind, she began to think of a time to go to the Wangfu and see Yang family's eldest sister, Yang Fei, to sound her out. 1449, the first month of the 14th year of the Zhengtong dynasty. Within Qiqian city. With the agreement of Gao Xiong, Ling Song, and a bunch of military officers, instructors, and political instructors, the attack on Lukang began. They used 2 months to get a clear understanding of the situation in Lukang and Taichung. Coincidentally, the shipyard had developed a new generation of fast ships, and they had officially tested it, proving its superiority. When the Navy and land forces announced that they would attack Lukang at dawn tomorrow, they would occupy it by land and sea, and then take down Taichung. In order to ensure the success of this operation and to reduce their own casualties and losses. For this battle, they would use the new ships number 1, number 2, and number 3 as the vanguard, led by Gao Xiong himself. There were 4 new ships, Number 4 went to South America and North America to search for rubber trees, and there were 100 ships of different sizes. There were 100 ships of other models, carrying 3 regular Navy companies and 2,000 auxiliary Navy soldiers. The moment they appeared, they would appear on Lukang with lightning speed and catch the enemy off guard. On land, Leng Song personally led the troops, using 3 regular army companies and 2,000 auxiliary army soldiers. After taking down Lukang, they went straight for Taichung and took over half of Ryukyu Island. Before this, a total of 3 exercises had been conducted, and any problems that might arise had been properly resolved. Filled with confidence, a total of 4,600 soldiers ate dinner and rested for 4 hours before the army set off. They slowly approached Port Deer without making a single sound. On the ocean, the moonlight shone, and the ripples were like a mirror that had been split into hundreds of pieces, reflecting huge shadows. New Number 1, New Number 2, and New Number 3, which had just been completed by the shipyard, were 3 large and fast ships. Faintly, they appeared in the ocean 20 miles away from Deer Port. Behind him, there were hundreds of horse ships, grain ships, warships, and warships of all kinds. Gao Xiong, who was leading the team, stood in the command cabin of the new Number 1 ship. When he looked up, a dark cloud happened to appear, blocking the bright moonlight. He was the one who issued a clear and loud order. "Let's go." Just as the order was given, the sound of the ship's engine starting could be heard. Back then, the ships relied on human power to move the sails when there was wind, but the oars when there was no wind. The biggest difference between the new ships and them was that they had internal combustion engines, usually diesel engines, that were connected by shafts and had propellers that spun. The propellers would stir the water, and the water would give a reaction force that would be transmitted to the ship through the shafts and diesel engines, pushing the ship forward. This way, not only could they save a lot of manpower and resources, but more importantly, they were extremely fast. It was only a distance of 20 miles, but they arrived at Deer Harbor in less than 15 minutes. They had never thought that someone would come looking for trouble from the sea. At this moment, the gates were wide open, like an unguarded city that never sleeps. It wasn't until the Number 1, Number 2, and Number 3 warships lined up in a straight line and prepared their Type 90 60mm mortars to fire that the warships belonging to the first Shang dynasty in Deer Port finally came to their senses. In the dark night, it was impossible to see how many enemy ships were there. However, once they discovered the enemy, the 300-odd warships in the harbor were about to retaliate. When the alarm sounded, countless sailors ran out from the military camp on land. From the looks of it, they were about to board the ship to face the enemy. In the harbor, there were more than 10 warships from the first Shang dynasty that were stationed there all year round. They were about to turn and face the enemy. Attack! If anyone dares to retaliate, sink them all. In the command cabin, Gao Xiong issued orders as he stared intently at Deer Harbor for any signs of movement. Boom boom boom. Following the order, the Number 1, Number 2, and Number 3 cannons on the Number 1, Number 2, and Number 3 ships started firing at the moving enemy ships. The powerful flames were like the brightest beacon in the dark night, instantly lighting up half of Lukang. At the same time, a few moving warships from the first Shang dynasty were hit and destroyed. The powerful modern cannons had an unimaginable attack power. No matter what kind of ship it was, as long as it was hit by the cannons, it would immediately shatter into pieces. There would only be the sound of people screaming and not the slightest bit of resistance. 3 cannons at a time. After 3 consecutive rounds, the precision of the cannons made the first Shang dynasty's warships that were moving like snails into fixed targets. The only thing they could do was to become the target of the cannons and wait for the cannons to hit them. The flames soared into the sky and the sound of people screaming spread out, causing the sailors on land who wanted to board the ships to stop in their tracks in fear. Who is it? How could their firearms be so powerful? If we charge onto the ships now, how is that different from seeking death? The sailors didn't dare to act rashly. After all, no one was an idiot. No one would dare to charge forward even if they knew that they would die. In the command room of number 1, Gao Xiong was looking at the scene in front of him proudly. He didn't give the order to fire the cannons as he was following Yang Chendong's orders. There were too many Han people on Ryukyu Island and it was best not to kill people of his own race. Furthermore, the 9 cannons were enough to cause the enemy to panic. His ambush mission was already more than half completed. Now, he just had to wait for the other ships to catch up. Then, it would be time for the army to press forward and seize the ships and captives. Using the fact that the ships behind were too slow and didn't have enough space to catch up, Gao Xiong turned his head and looked at Yu Qian and Shen Yu who were staring at him in disbelief. "Two sirs? In your opinion, how is the strength of our navy?" "Amazing. Inconceivable, simply inconceivable. Wherever the cannons go, who can fight against them?" Shen Yu's face was full of shock as he sighed. Even Yu Qian, an important minister recorded in the history of the Ming Dynasty, a man who had once single-handedly reversed the history of the Ming Dynasty, didn't have a trace of calmness at this moment. His eyes were also wide open as he stared at the scene in front of him. In fact, what Yu Qian saw was too many things that could surprise him. Ever since he was captured and transported to Qiqian City, he felt that everything he saw was like a dream. The spacious cement roads in the city, the orderly streets, the lush green trees, the rosy complexions of the people who were happy every day, and the new army that always maintained a high spirit. All of this was something he didn't even dare to dream about. Chapter 112. Everyone had something to do and money to earn. Regardless of their birth, as long as one of their parents was Han, they would be able to receive a good education from a young age. When people fell sick, they would have money to treat them, and the greatest guarantee was the possibility of dying from illness. There were 3 meals a day, not 2. Not only that, they could eat meat for every meal, and everyone had new clothes to wear. This seemed to be something that only humans could dream of, right? But right now, all of this was happening in Crimson City. Those bright windows were something that even the Great Ming Imperial Palace didn't have the money to install, but it was extremely common here. There were also power plants, munitions factories, furniture factories, garment factories, cement factories, shipyards, glass factories, paper factories, and so on that he had never heard of before. Wherever he went, he was shocked, and it was the kind of shock that went straight to the bottom of his heart. If it wasn't for Crimson City, he wouldn't have known that the world could be so beautiful. After 2 months of visiting, Yu Qian finally found out that this was the property of Yang Shima, who didn't have a high position in the capital and didn't have much authority. Everything here was made by this person. This place was even more prosperous than the capital and Nanjing, and it was actually the private property of the 6th young master of the Yang clan. Then what was he trying to do? Yu Qian couldn't understand, or rather, he didn't dare to think about it. But after witnessing the naval battle of Deer Harbor tonight, he finally realized that his suspicions were about to come true. As an official of the Great Ming Dynasty, the first thing he had to do was to spread the news of this place. It would be best if he could let all the officials in the court know about what was happening in Crimson City. But could he escape? And if he really did go out, would anyone believe him if he told them what he saw? Even if someone believed him, with the current military strength of the Ming Dynasty, would they be able to defeat the new army in Crimson City? All sorts of thoughts flashed through his mind like a movie. Yu Qian realized that the expansion of Crimson City was unavoidable, and it wasn't something that could be stopped by human strength. Gao Xiong chuckled and proudly looked at the 2 people who were named by the 6th young master to take special care of. From his point of view, what important officials of the Great Ming Dynasty? At this moment, they had probably been blinded by everything in front of them and were scared out of their wits. On the land of Deer Harbor, thousands of sailors stood there, not daring to move. The flames in front of them seemed to be a warning to them. If they dared to step into the warship, they would be smashed into smithereens. Who wouldn't be afraid of death? This was especially so for the first Shang dynasty, who knew that they would definitely die and couldn't even pay their soldiers. Hesitation could be seen in the eyes of the soldiers. What's going on? Why haven't you boarded yet? What are you waiting for? A loud roar sounded out. Just as the navy members were hesitating to move forward, a man wearing the first Shang dynasty's military uniform rushed over with his troops. General Pan has come. Some of the sailors had already recognized the identity of the person who had come. Pan Tao, the general guarding Deer Harbor. He was also one of the trusted generals of the first Shang dynasty's 13-year-old king, Shangde. It was because of Pan Tao's existence that Deer Harbor became an impregnable pass. It became the biggest barrier between Qiqian City and the first Shang dynasty. Pan Tao also heard the commotion outside and brought thousands of troops over. From afar, he first saw the flames that soared into the sky. Following that, he saw the thousands of sailors standing together on the shore in a mess. Seeing that a huge battle was about to happen, all the sailors actually didn't board the warship but stayed on the shore. Instantly, he was furious. Just as he got closer, a loud roar sounded out. The sailors who were originally hesitating were all frightened when they saw Pan Tao bringing his troops over. They started to walk towards the warship that was anchored at the harbor. This Pan Tao was famous for killing people without blinking. If they stayed here, they would be killed by this person before they could be killed by the powerful cannons. Since they were going to die no matter what, they might as well try their luck on the warship. Over 300 warships, even if only a third of them managed to make it out, it would still be a bloody battle for the Yang family navy. Even if they had advanced weapons, casualties would still be unavoidable. The situation of the battle seemed to be changing. At this moment, the Yang family army that was already prepared on land began to move. Sniper rifle, can you find Pan Tao's exact location? Leng Song, who was hiding 800 meters away from Deer Harbor, used the night vision binoculars in his hands to see everything that was happening. When he realized that Pan Tao's appearance could cause chaos in the battle and increase the difficulty of taking over Deer Harbor, he asked the sniper beside him, who was skilled in shooting. Reporting to battalion commander, there are too many people and they are too densely packed. We can't accurately hit the target. The sniper shook his head dejectedly. Was it because his shooting skills were bad? It wasn't that his observation skills weren't good enough or that the range of the sniper rifle wasn't good enough. It was just that there were too many people, densely packed and extremely chaotic. It wasn't realistic to want to take Pan Tao's life with one shot. Hearing that the sniper couldn't complete his mission successfully, a sharp glint flashed across Leng Song's eyes. He seemed to have made up his mind as he said, "Rocket launchers, get ready. Everyone move forward. When you have enough range, fire indiscriminately." Originally, he only wanted to take Pan Tao's life. However, the scouts found out that this person was entrusted with an important task by the first Shang dynasty's king, Shangde. It was impossible for him to surrender. Since that was the case, he could only kill him. Although this person was also a descendant of the Han people, if he died, more Han people would submit to him. No matter how he looked at it, it was worth it. However, the situation didn't allow it. He could only let Leng Song kill more people. War had always been cruel and there was no right or wrong. This was because history was written by the victors. Leng Song gave the order, and the 3 companies of 300 outstanding cold vanguard soldiers moved forward with him. Behind them were 2,000 auxiliary soldiers. Even though they were auxiliary soldiers, their movements were still nimble. Even though they were following behind the main soldiers, they weren't too far behind. On Deer Port, because of Pan Tao's appearance, there were Navy members who were walking towards their ships. However, no matter how you looked at it, these people's speed wasn't fast enough. They were like crawling snails. All of you, hurry up. Whoever is behind will be punished for disobeying orders. Behead. Seeing that this was going to continue, who knew how long it would take for them to form enough resistance on the sea? Pan Tao roared angrily. As expected, the moment the order was given, the Navy members' movements became much faster. In the new command cabin, Gao Xiong was observing everything through his binoculars. When he saw more enemies boarding the ships, he couldn't help but say anxiously, "This Ling Song, what is he doing? Why isn't he launching a land attack? Forget it, forget it. Order the cannons to extend and fire at the enemies boarding the ships." Boom boom boom. The 3 new ships fired 3 cannons as planned, hitting the intersection of the waterways in Deer Port. The powerful shockwave from the explosion instantly took away at least 100 lives. The number of injured people who were hit by the shockwave was uncountable. After the 3 cannons were fired, Ling Song led the army to the left side of the enemy 200 meters away. Immediately, 5 rocket launchers fired at the same time, launching an indiscriminate attack. Wherever General Pan Tao was suspected to be, he became the focus of the firepower. Boom 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 boom. After the 5 consecutive shots, under the powerful firepower, a large number of enemies fell to the ground. Waves of cries and howls could be heard. Countless broken limbs were scattered everywhere. Advance in attack formation. Anyone who doesn't surrender. Kill. Ling Song saw that the first wave of rocket launchers had caused heavy damage to the enemy. He was the first to stand up from the ground. Following him, the 300 soldiers of the Leng army marched forward in a straight line, maintaining a complete formation. Yang Qindong had taught them before that if they could attack, they shouldn't defend. He also said that attacking was the best defense and also the last resort to solve all problems. Following this order, and to reduce the number of casualties, Ling Song decided not to attack. Once they attacked, they had to hurt the enemy until they didn't know which direction was north, south, east and west. Only then would they choose to surrender faster. The 300 soldiers of the Leng army spat out tongues of fire from their guns. In the darkness, they were like an unbreakable fire net as they closed in step by step. Behind them, the 2,000 auxiliary soldiers wielding large swords and spears weren't idle either. Although they couldn't walk in front with spears because of their status, they still shouted in unison, "Those who surrender will not be killed. Those who surrender will not be killed." In the chaos of the cannons, the place where Pan Tao was at became the focus of the attack. After losing contact with the general, facing the continuous barrage of fire, those who wanted to attack with swords were shot and fell to the ground, not moving at all. Under such a strong pressure, the Shang Dynasty soldiers guarding Deer Port were forced to retreat. Countless times, reality told them that those who wanted to charge with weapons would inevitably die. In such a situation where they would die if they charged forward, no one could muster up the courage to charge forward. Just as the army was advancing with an unstoppable momentum, the Yang family navy finally arrived. Under the primitive speed of the boat, which only relied on the sails and the rowers, the distance of 20 miles took them nearly 2 incense sticks of time longer than the other boats. But no matter what, they still managed to arrive. Then, it was the arrival of the army. The huge commotion had already created a psychological pressure on the soldiers of Deer Port. Those who kneel and surrender will not be killed. Chapter 113. The shouts continued to come from the mouths of the 2,000 auxiliary soldiers. These shouts were the last straw that broke the camel's back. Seeing that the tide was turning, the first Shang Dynasty soldier finally threw his weapon to the ground, squatted down and hugged his head, making a gesture of surrender. With the first person, the second, the third, and soon, the sound of weapons being thrown to the ground could be heard. This army had completely lost their morale. The Yang family navy quickly stationed themselves at Deer Harbor. Large batches of auxiliary soldiers walked out of the warships and picked up the weapons that were thrown on the ground in an orderly manner. Then, groups of captives were tied together like candied haws. Battalion Commander Gao, I'll leave this place to you. I'll lead the army and rush to Taichung City. We'll try to liberate the place before dawn. Leng Song walked in front of Gao Xiong, who had just landed, and saluted with a hint of excitement on his face. Some people were born to be soldiers. They weren't afraid of war. On the contrary, if there was no war, they would feel that something was missing. Leng Song and Gao Xiong were clearly such people. All right, Battalion Commander Leng, just go. Leave this place to me. Oh right, do you need me to send some men to assist you? After all, Taichung is a big city on Ryukyu Island. Gao Xiong asked with concern. No need. According to the investigation, there aren't many soldiers there. I'll lead 3 companies of Ling Feng and 2,000 auxiliary soldiers to control the place. Let's go. Leng Song rejected Gao Xiong's support and turned to lead the army towards Taichung City. Keep a close eye on the captives. But remember, don't abuse them or scold them. Gao Xiong watched as Ling Feng left and began to clean up the mess. What was worth mentioning was that Yu Qian and Shun Yu were also busy. They did not know that after more than 2 months of experience, they had gradually begun to adapt to the environment and life here. Moreover, they had already subconsciously treated themselves as a part of Crimson City, doing what they could to the best of their abilities. Taichung City. The city walls were more than 10 meters tall and could be considered one of the biggest cities on Ryukyu Island. There were nearly 200,000 people here. Many of them had migrated here from the mainland. They slowly adapted to life here and spread their branches and leaves. Deer Harbor was only a dozen or so kilometers away. When the cannons roared in the distance, the citizens in the city could more or less sense it. This caused many people to anxiously stay at home, not daring to go out and ask around. It was like the darkness before dawn, causing the entire city to be under a terrifying pressure. It was as if any spark could ignite it. After more than an hour, Leng Song led the army to Taichung City. With their arrival, the city gates opened from the inside. This was the work of the infiltration team. The city gates opened and without much effort, the army entered the city. Following that, they quickly took control of the important officials of the First Shang Dynasty and the 4 city gates. As for the less than 500 guards in the city, they were either killed or surrendered. There was no third option. They took control of the entire Taichung City in an instant. This was the well-trained Ling Feng. They did not harm a single person, nor did they steal anything from the citizens. The next morning, when some brave citizens pushed open their doors and walked out onto the streets, they realized that there were many tall, fit, and energetic young soldiers. They were different from the original city guards. They were courteous and did not offend the people. When some people fell on the street out of fear of seeing them, these patrolling and maintaining law and order soldiers would stop and help them up. They were as amiable as big brothers who had been neighbors for many years. The actions of the auxiliary soldiers eventually influenced the citizens in the city. 1 spread to 10, 10 spread to 100, and more citizens walked out of their homes. Taichung City was as before. With lightning speed, they took down Deer Harbor in a single night. Under the rapid march, they took down Taichung City without shedding a drop of blood. This caused the situation on Ryukyu Island to change drastically. Originally, with Crimson Castle as the base, it only took up 1/8 of the entire Ryukyu Island. However, after taking down Qishan, Alishan, Yushan, Lukang, and Taichung, they had taken over at least 2/3 of the island. The remaining 1/3 was where the First Shang Dynasty's capital was located, which was the central north region. However, it was also the most densely populated place on Ryukyu Island. In the Battle of Deer Harbor and Taichung, they killed more than 1,000 enemies and captured more than 11,000 people. This greatly increased the population of the Yang clan, allowing them to reach a population of 400,000. Including the auxiliary soldiers, they had close to 10,000 people. They took over 300 ships and more than 5,000 sailors. This battle greatly increased the strength of the Yang clan. At the same time, it allowed them to become the strongest faction on Ryukyu Island. The Battle of Deer Harbor was a battle where they won with a small number of people. At the same time, it also proved that quality was more important than quantity. However, at this time, whether it was Gao Xiong or Ling Song, they didn't want to expand their gains and enter the central region. Under the rapid development, the Yang clan needed to stabilize and digest. They didn't want to continue swallowing. Otherwise, there might be internal chaos. Yang Chendong once said that battles had to be fought one by one and cities had to be conquered one by one. One shouldn't only think about conquering territory and neglect internal development. If that happened, the quality of life of the people would deteriorate. If that happened, the building might collapse at any time. What the new army needed now was to digest everything that they had just obtained. This might take half a year or even longer. These people needed to redistribute the land, learn new things, learn how to be hygienic and polite, and completely integrate into the Yang clan system. In half a year, they would only learn the surface. Fortunately, both the new army and Yang Chendong, who was their leader, were young enough. They still had time to develop everything. Moreover, they could use this time to negotiate with the first Shang dynasty and see if there was any hope of peacefully taking over the central region and reducing the killing. Negotiation. This was one of the Yang clan's methods, a way to stall for time. They needed to digest their gains. Negotiation. This was indeed the only way for the first Shang dynasty to resolve the current crisis. After Leng Song expressed his willingness to negotiate, the other party's diplomatic group arrived. They were extremely humble and directly expressed their intention to submit. They expressed that they were willing to become a vassal state and were willing to pay tribute every year. However, they also stated their request, which was to ensure the existence of autonomy. With Taichung as the dividing line, the northern region would belong to the first Shang dynasty and the southern region would belong to the Yang clan. Such an outcome was clearly not in line with Yang Chendong's previous plans. He wanted to fully occupy Little Ryukyu Island. Since they couldn't come to an agreement, they could talk slowly. Once the new army digested their gains, they could start another war and completely solve the problem of Little Ryukyu Island. Yang Chendong's forces were developing rapidly. In the capital, he was quietly preparing for the new year in the Yang clan manner. 1449, the 14th year of the Jianghu dynasty. This year would be recorded in the annals of history. If everything went as expected, the famous Tomu Fortress incident would occur this year, signifying the beginning of the Ming dynasty's decline. In truth, from the moment he entered the capital, Yang Chendong had been thinking about his next move. He already knew what was going to happen. With Yang Chendong's abilities, he was completely capable of changing history and nipping in the bud. But he had never done so. In fact, he had only been using his troops on Little Ryukyu Island. In the Great Ming, he had only been developing commerce and establishing Yangbao and the Immortal abode. He was afraid that if he made too big of a move, it would affect the course of history. In the current Ming dynasty, eunuchs were in power, causing all the ministers to feel insecure. Treacherous officials were in power, and even the position of eunuch was hereditary. If this continued, something would happen to the Great Ming sooner or later, and the only ones to suffer would be the common people. As a Han, Yang Chendong naturally didn't want to see his compatriots suffer. What he wanted was to see the Han grow stronger and become the rulers of the world. For this goal, the hundreds of thousands of Han brothers in the Tomu Fortress incident could only become sacrificial lambs. With a sigh, Yang Chendong thought about how many loyal officials and generals would die in the Tomu Fortress incident. This was a loss for the Great Ming, a loss for the country. But when he thought about how he couldn't do anything with his current status and influence, even if he mobilized the Chizian army, he might draw the ire of the imperial court and the tolerance of the Walla. After all, to resist foreign aggression, one must first pacify internal affairs. Young master, big sister is here, Yang Chendong sighed in his study when he saw Xiaoyin enter with a smile. Big sister is here? Hearing that Yang Fei was here, Yang Chendong immediately got up and went out to welcome her. Among his brothers and sisters, he had the deepest feelings for his big sister, and he respected her the most. Other than the fact that she had raised him when he was young, it was also because Yang Fei gave him the feeling that she was like a mother. In the main hall of the Yang family manor, Yang Fei sat on a chair and tasted tea. Behind her stood 2 personal maids. Thinking back, when Yang Fei got married, the Yang family was at the peak of its power, so she naturally married into a good family. At that time, the Wang family was also a large family. Now, big sister's husband, Wang Meng, had become a rank 5 official at the Ministry of Rights in his early 40s. Wang Meng was a scholarly person, and he treated Yang Fei with respect. The two of them had always lived in harmony. Yang Fei was knowledgeable and had the style of a noble mother. The entire Wang family was managed by her in an orderly manner, and she had been praised by many people. Chapter 114. Just looking at Yang Fei, her life was pretty good and she should be satisfied. But because of her younger brothers and sisters, she had no choice but to worry about them. Sometimes, she would even think of ways to help them financially. Over the years, her body was not as good as before. Fortunately, Yang Chendong entered the capital. His appearance changed the situation of the descendants of the Yang family. This made Yang Fei feel that the pressure on her was reduced by a lot. As for her other sisters, they could get 1,000 taels of silver from Yang Chendong every month. After having money, her position in her husband's family naturally rose. In addition, it was rumored that the 6th young master of the Yang family had a good relationship with eunuch Wang Zhen. This made them even more afraid to make things difficult for the Yang family. Suddenly, Yang Fei did not need to worry about her sisters and felt that she had nothing to do. Not long ago, the daughter of the Hu family, Hu Yan, came looking for her. Although she did not say anything and only gave a simple greeting, Yang Fei knew what she was thinking. Thinking that her little brother would be 19 years old after the new year, it was time to settle the problem of marriage. Thus, she came looking for her before the new year. Big sister. Still wearing his green clothes, Yang Chendong appeared with a smile. He did not know why, but in front of Yang Fei, he could always put down the burden on his body and become relaxed. Is big sister's body much better? I still have a few anti-inflammatory medicines here. When big sister leaves, bring them back. If you have any headache or fever, you can use them at your discretion. Good, big sister's body is already fine. I have troubled little brother. Yang Fei's face was full of smiles. Her eyes were filled with satisfaction and happiness. Originally, she thought that the few young master of the Yang family did not live up to expectations and that the Yang family would decline from now on. She never thought that Yang Chendong, who did not speak much when he was young, would suddenly change greatly after he grew up and become so talented. This was an unexpected surprise and also let Yang Fei see the hope of the Yang family rising again. Hee, you are my big sister. It is natural for little brother to care about you. Regarding Yang Chendong calling him little brother, this special title, not only did Yang Chendong not object, he even felt at ease. He felt that this was a kind of intimacy. Of course, if it was someone else who called him little brother, he would probably be the first to object. Even if his second brother called him little six, he would get angry. That's right, you still know that I'm your big sister? Since little brother is so concerned about big sister should also be concerned about little brother. Tell me, what do you think of the Hu family's Hu Yan? Yang Chendong's face suddenly became much more serious as she stared at Yang Chendong with bright eyes. Hearing that big sister was actually doing this for Hu Yan, Yang Chendong coughed lightly and said somewhat awkwardly, "Big sister, little brother is still young. I don't want to. I have no choice but to do so." Let me tell you, this time, don't play dumb with me. You have to give big sister a clear attitude. Is it okay or not? If it's okay, I will immediately send someone to the Hu family to propose marriage. If it's not okay, you have to tell them so that they don't get in the way. Yang Fei stared at Yang Chendong for an answer. The reason why she was so serious was probably because whenever she mentioned this matter in the past, Yang Chendong would change the topic, causing her to not know where the topic went every time. Today, she had made sufficient preparations. If she didn't get an answer, she definitely wouldn't give up. Big sister's eyes stared closely at Yang Chendong, causing him to feel even more awkward. For a moment, he didn't know what to say. He only scratched his head and said, "Little brother thinks that this matter really doesn't need to be too anxious." Yang Chendong, who had always been calm in the face of trouble and gave others the feeling that he was always successful and ignorant, was indeed at a loss like a child right now. This appearance directly caused Xiaoyin, who was beside him, to cover her mouth and laugh softly. Not only that, the two personal maids following behind Yang Fei also had smiles on their faces. Clearly, they also rarely saw the sixth young master, who had always been calm and collected, reveal such a childish appearance. Big sister Yang Chendong, on the other hand, couldn't help but sigh softly when she saw Yang Chendong in such a difficult position. Little brother, you might think that big sister is a little overbearing, but think about it. Hu Yan has always stayed in the word pavilion for you. Now, she will be 17 after the new year. During this time, who knows how many nobles have come to propose marriage, but they were all rejected. She is waiting for you. Then, even if you think that you are still young, you have to give her an explanation. You can't just wait bitterly like this. What is going on? She wanted Yang Chendong to be responsible for her. If he couldn't bear this responsibility, then he had to tell her and let her prepare early. At the very least, he couldn't delay her. Yang Chendong knew that Yang Fei's words were very reasonable. He immediately replied, "Yes, big sister is right. How about this, I will propose marriage to the Hu clan at the end of this year." Taking a deep breath, Yang Chendong made his decision. This wasn't just because Yang Chendong knew that Hu Yan liked him. In fact, he also liked this playful and cute girl very much. In addition, her background was the granddaughter of the Minister of Rights, Hu Shao. She was definitely a descendant of a prestigious family. Marrying such a girl would also be helpful for him when he wanted to leave in the future. This was equivalent to him finding a strong ally in the imperial court. Yang Chendong finally gave an answer. Yang Fei let out a long sigh of relief. "Okay, little brother, this is what you said. I will reply to the Hu clan like this. When the time comes, you can't go back on your words." "I won't go back on my words, I won't go back on my words." Yang Chendong shook his head and smiled bitterly. He really didn't expect that his first marriage in 2 lifetimes would be completed under pressure. Of course, this was also his own choice. If he didn't want to, then in this world, there really wasn't anyone who could make things difficult for him. Seeing that the young master had finally decided on his marriage, Xiao Yin was also happy. Although she was already the young master's bed-warming servant girl and had even done the deed of husband and wife, she was very clear in her heart that with her background, being able to reach this step was already very difficult. Wanting to become the main wife, this was simply impossible in the society of that time. Fortunately, she had interacted with Hu Yan before. This girl was kind-hearted and should be easy to get along with. Finally deciding on marriage, when the news spread back to the Hu clan, Hu Yan was naturally full of joy. Although she still had to wait for nearly a year, she was willing to endure it. In her opinion, she was destined to be the Dong Shuai's bride. As for the night, it wasn't a big deal. The clan head was getting married at the end of the year. When the news spread throughout the Yang clan manor, all of the villagers were extremely happy. Ever since the patriarch came to the Yang village, the villagers' lives were getting better day by day. Today, During the new year, each family was given 20 caddies of meat and 2 taels of silver. This kind of treatment was something that even their ancestors had never experienced before. For a moment, everyone was overjoyed. The bells of the new year rang out, and the capital fell into a celebratory mood. The immortal abode didn't require any seats. Every day, several thousand people came in, and money poured in. The novel programs and moving music made everyone who entered applaud. Naturally, this place became a popular place for wealthy guests. Just the number of people who applied for membership cards increased by several times. The total number of people who applied for 3 types of membership added up to 3,000. Just the sheer number of members made it so that if one wanted to spend money in the immortal abode, they had to make a reservation in advance. This made the business even more explosive. A large amount of money flowed into Yang Chendong's hands, causing others to gnash their teeth in anger. Some of the restaurants in the area and even some of the red light district's businesses were greatly affected. With new music to listen to, who would want to listen to old songs that had been memorized countless times? The popularity of the immortal abode naturally drew the envy of many, but compared to the profits of the sky beyond heaven, it paled in comparison. The sky beyond heaven silently opened for business 3 days after the immortal abode opened for business. Because of the novelty of its products, it instantly became popular. This was especially true after the immortal abode introduced a limited supply system. Many merchants had no choice but to squeeze their way in. Putting aside the other products, only 500 large bags of toilet paper were sold each day, for a total of 5,000 small bags. This was simply not enough to satisfy the needs of the high officials and nobles of the capital, and this wasn't even taking into account the many wealthy merchants of lower status who still had plenty of money in their pockets. After getting used to this soft paper, who would want to replace it with anything else? Even though a large bag of toilet paper sold for the astronomical price of 2 taels of silver, it was still sold out every morning when the store opened for business. Just this alone made a profit of 2,000 taels of silver, but in reality, even with the cost of transportation, it didn't even make 10 taels of silver. This was an almost invisible cost. Just the unremarkable toilet paper alone could make 2,000 taels of silver a day. That was more than 50,000 taels of silver a month. From this, one could see just how lucrative the profits were. There was also a perfume that no one had ever seen before. Not to mention anything else, just the beautiful glass bottle that was used to package the perfume was worth quite a lot. Only 100 bottles were sold every day, but each bottle was sold at a price of 50 taels. It was enough for the young ladies of the rich families to snatch it up in an instant. In this way, they could make another 100,000 taels of silver a month. There was no need to mention all these things one by one. The popularity of the sky beyond heaven was mainly due to the novelty of its products. Even when other merchants saw them, they felt as if they couldn't touch them. The limited supply of goods made it impossible for them to store large quantities of goods. What if they couldn't even meet the demand in the capital? How could they possibly sell these goods elsewhere? Businessmen were all profit-seeking. For their own interests, they had looked for Yang Fu more than once. This was the spokesperson of Dong Shui in the business world. They expressed that they hoped to get more goods. They even said that they did not care about the price, as long as there were goods for them to sell. After all, no matter how expensive it was, it would still have to be sold at a higher price. Chapter 115. After consulting Yang Chendong on this matter, Yang Fu expressed that the Dong Shui, in order to ensure that the common people of the Great Ming could enjoy the benefits of these high-class goods, decided to provide a certain amount of goods to the merchants. As for the quantity, it could be twice as much as the daily limit in the capital. But there were also conditions. First, the highest bidder would win, and second, the goods could not appear on the market in the capital. This method of bidding was naturally Yang Chendong's idea. He knew that the nature of merchants was to seek profit. As long as they could obtain profit, they wouldn't care about what sort of people they were dealing with. They wouldn't care about the righteousness of the country or etiquette or shame. It was just like how in the later stages of the dynasty, the merchant groups and the power groups would collude, all of them aiming for military provisions and equipment. As a result, the Great Ming's defeat had been caused by internal strife. Since they didn't know any better, he might as well earn some of their money. At the very least, with this money in Yang Qindong's hands, he could guarantee that it would be used for the people of the Great Han. After making up his mind, Yang Qindong had Crimson City provide a large amount of goods, and for the sake of saving costs, he even had these merchants go directly to the Tientsin wharf to pick up the goods. Of course, in principle, the highest bidder would win. This method made the Tientsin wharf much more lively. Many merchants gathered here, and whenever they obtained a batch of goods through bidding, they would immediately head south to sell them. For a moment, the goods of the Yang clan were spread all over the country. Of course, the one who earned the most was still Yang Qindong, and his influence naturally grew. China was a country of connections, and anything could be done through connections. This seemed to have become a law that would never change. In order to obtain even more goods, many people sought out Yang Qindong through connections, such as his sixth sister, Yang Qin. Before Yang Qindong had come to the capital, Yang Qin had lived a good life, but her status had been very low. This was all because she had married a merchant. Being a third-class merchant meant that she couldn't even compare to the son of a good family. This made it very difficult for her to raise her head in front of her brothers and sisters. With the appearance of Yang Qindong, everything changed. Not only did her most capable sixth brother not look down on her, but he also took good care of her sister. Not only did he give her a monthly salary of 1,000 taels of silver, he also took care of her husband's business quite a bit. It was as if he was taking goods from the Yang family. Other merchants had to bid to obtain the goods, but the Bai family was able to obtain the best quality goods at an internal price from time to time. This allowed their family business to flourish very quickly. Yang Qindong had bestowed this body with the benefits of not forgetting his loved ones when he was rich. Since he had taken over this body, he had to at least treat him well. Otherwise, how was he going to face him after 100 years? Yang Qindong didn't want to do anything wrong, and he didn't want to let down anyone who treated him well. Therefore, as long as he could help, he wouldn't be stingy to the Yang family. In comparison, there were some people who took advantage of him and still wanted to scheme against him. This person was Zhu Qizhan of the Great Ming Dynasty. The popularity of the immortal abode and sky beyond heaven, especially the latter, which could be described as close to 10,000 taels of gold a day, deeply stimulated him, the current emperor. Looking at the annual income of his national treasury, which was only 4 to 5 million taels of silver, he heard that this number could be earned by Yang Qindong in 2 months. This made him envious and jealous at the same time. Slowly, he forgot that Yang Qindong had once brought him high-yield potatoes. He began to think about how to deal with the East Marshal and obtain more benefits. In the inner court of the imperial palace, Zhu Qizhan saw that Empress Qian was doing some needlework out of boredom. She even said that it was for the sake of generating income for the imperial palace. He couldn't suppress his anger. How could a small crown prince wash horses and earn several times more money than him, the emperor? Why would the empress, who was the mother of the world, want to work to earn more money? Wasn't this showing that he, the emperor, was too incompetent? When a person began to have an idea, it was very difficult to take it back. Zhu Qizhan was the same. Ever since he remembered Yang Qindong, he thought about how to use a method to take a large amount of gold and silver from his hands. This caused him to be unable to sleep at night. Although Zhu Qizhan was the emperor, there were too many things in the world that he could not do anything about. For example, the interests of the officials were not something that he could touch as he wished. Ever since Emperor Wu of the Han Dynasty dismissed the 100 schools of thought and respected only Confucianism, Confucianism became the orthodox ideology of feudal society. Under this kind of education system, some of the scholars became the upper class and nobles. In order to ensure that their children and grandchildren could also enjoy glory and wealth, they naturally gathered together. Everyone would swarm to oppose any policies and decisions that targeted them. On the contrary, they would fully support any actions that were beneficial to them. As time passed, their power became greater and greater. Even if a dynasty was destroyed, these people could still change schools and continue their glory. One of the most classic examples was the Kong family. A dynasty's legacy was only 300 to 400 years. Even if it was the Xia, Shang, and Zhou dynasties, the strongest dynasty was only the Ji family's 800 years of history. However, a scholar's family was able to continue for 2,000 years. It had to be said that this was a miracle in the history of the world. This was an existence that Zhu Qizhen could not afford to offend. At least, if he wanted to touch these people, he needed a good reason. Yang Chendong was born in the Yang family and could be considered a descendant of a prestigious family. Now that he was a secondary class rank 5 official and was also a high scholar, if he wanted to touch him, he would not be able to convince everyone without a good reason. But what made Zhu Qizhen even more depressed was that his teacher, Wang Zhen, actually had a good personal relationship with Yang Chendong. Wang Zhen had spoken good words for Yang Chendong in front of him more than once. This made Zong feel that if he told his teacher about his plan to deal with Yang Chendong, it would most likely not work. Since he could not tell anyone, Zhu Qizhen wanted to do it himself. Just as he was thinking of the best way to solve this problem, an opportunity came. His third sister, Princess Changde, was about to celebrate her 14th birthday. Princess Changde was the third daughter of the late Emperor Zhu Zhanji. She and Zhu Qizhen shared the same father and mother as each other and was often called the third princess. Because when she was just born, her father had passed away. Zhu Qizhen, as the older brother, had given his younger sister enough brotherly love. Because of this, she was unruly and willful from a young age, slowly becoming an existence that gave her older brother, the emperor, a headache. Every year, whenever it was Princess Changde's birthday, it was also a time for Zhu Qizhen to be troubled. This younger sister's temper was really bad. If there was anything that did not go her way, she would beat and scold them on the spot. When it was her birthday, it was even more so. If her wishes were not satisfied, not only would the eunuchs and palace maids suffer, even he would not be in a good mood. This once-a-year headache was coming again. While Zhu Qizhen was having a headache, he suddenly thought of Yang Chendong. Didn't you say that you were multi-talented? Didn't others say that you were omnipotent? That's good. This third princess' birthday will be in your hands. If it was done well, then it would naturally be a matter of course. On the other hand, if it was not done well, then he would find a legitimate reason to do it. He did not ask for anything to be done to you. You only needed to take out some money and give it to Zhen. If this was the case, then the other ministers would not be able to do anything, right? Could it be that if you did a bad job, then there would be a problem if you just took out some money? With this thought in mind, Zhu Qizhen unexpectedly took the initiative to come to the third princess courtyard for the first time. This made the eunuchs and palace maids who passed by very surprised. They could not understand. What was wrong with the emperor today? Normally, he would not be able to avoid them. Why did he take the initiative to come forward today? Princess Changde was currently swinging on a swing in her courtyard. Several palace maids and eunuchs were still kneeling on the side, tears still flowing from their eyes. Clearly, it was because of the punishment they had just received. The reason for the punishment was even more speechless. It was because these eunuchs and palace maids did not follow her request to swing the swing to a certain height. And this height did not refer to the highest height, but to the exact height of 120 centimeters from the ground. Thinking about it, even if one used a ruler to measure, it would not be able to achieve such precision. But this was Princess Changde's request. If they could not satisfy her request, then they could only be punished. Zhu Qixian's sudden appearance caused the eunuchs and palace maids in the courtyard to be shocked. At the same time, they all knelt on the ground and shouted, "Long live the emperor!" A figure quickly rushed out from the crowd and arrived in front of Ingzong. She excitedly shouted, "Imperial brother, how come you have time to come see your younger sister today?" Seeing the third princess rushing over, because she ran too fast, she almost fell to the ground. Ingzong instinctively wanted to dodge. This kind of thing had happened countless times. Once Princess Changde fell to the ground, there would be a burst of howling and crying. As the emperor, if he did not bleed, then there would be no way to stop it. After instinctively taking a step back, Yang Qindong's figure suddenly appeared in Zhu Qixian's mind. Zhu Qixian's footsteps naturally came to a stop, and he immediately pulled Princess Changde into a tight embrace. Princess Changde hugged Zhu Qixian tightly and said coquettishly, "Imperial brother, your younger sister is about to turn 14. I know. This time, we came precisely because of Shangde's matter. This time, we plan to have Yang Qindong hold a birthday banquet for you. What do you think?" Zhu Qixian's face was full of smiles as he probed. "Dong Shui. I've heard of him. Your younger sister has also been to that immortal abode. It's really not bad." A trace of reminiscence appeared in Princess Changde's eyes. She then said happily, "Imperial brother, are you planning to reserve the entire immortal abode?" "Of course not." Zhu Qixian shook his head. Reserving the entire immortal abode for a princess' birthday? He would not do such a foolish thing. Those imperial censors would definitely stand up and criticize him. Moreover, that was Yang Qindong's home ground. If he wanted to cause trouble, it would be difficult for him to do so. This was not in line with his original intentions. Chapter 116. Seeing Zhu Qixian shake his head, Princess Changde was clearly displeased. "If I don't go to the immortal abode, do I have to celebrate my birthday in the palace as usual? That would be too boring." "Who says that it's boring in the palace? In our opinion, whose idea is more important? Everyone says that Yang Qindong is brimming with talent. If he's the one planning it, it'll be just as exciting, right? Of course, if he doesn't do his best, we'll punish him for his crimes. How about that?" Zhu Qixian laughed heartily, delighted at the good excuse he'd found. Princess Shangde's expression also softened. Good. Imperial brother still loves me dearly. Then let's have him do this. I'd like to see just how he'll make this princess happy. A beautiful smile appeared on her face that was still too young and tender. Princess Changde was the third princess. She was still very pretty. After all, how could someone who'd managed to become the imperial concubine be lacking in looks? Her children would naturally be handsome and beautiful. However, her temper wasn't too good. She was a bit too domineering. The information about the third princess was quickly sent to the study of the Yang manor and placed on Yang Qindong's desk. This was news sent by Mao Mu. With a large amount of money and his status as a eunuch, Mao Mu already had his own influence in the palace. As for the emperor's sudden appearance in the third princess palace, it naturally didn't escape his eyes. "You're going to punish the young master for his crimes?" Yang Qindong couldn't help but laugh when he saw the detailed records, including every word Zhu Qixian had said. Truly, accompanying the monarch was like accompanying a tiger. He'd contributed a high-yield crop like potatoes in exchange for a minor fifth-rank official position. Yang Qindong didn't say anything in response. He'd never intended to stand in the great Ming dynasty's imperial court in the first place. "But not only did you not give me a reward, you actually coveted everything I've obtained and wanted to scheme against me. That's a bit too much." Yang Qindong's face showed a trace of anger, which made him very uncomfortable. Presumably, no one would feel good being stared at by the emperor. Fortunately, Yang Qindong was not an ordinary person, and he knew what it meant by impatience in small matters would spoil great plans. Fine, since you've already made your move, I'll naturally receive it. Someone, bring Lady Xue here. Yang Qindong ordered outside the study and began to plan the birthday party in his mind. He received the news at lunchtime. In the afternoon, a eunuch came to deliver the imperial edict. After explaining the emperor's intention, an imperial edict was delivered to Yang Qindong's hands. After that, the eunuch who delivered the edict leaned over to Yang Qindong, who was kneeling on the ground, and whispered in his ear. Eunuch Wang said that official Yang doesn't need to be too difficult, as long as the situation is good enough. As for His Majesty, Duke Wang will put in a good word for him. Thank you, Eunuch Wang. Yang Qindong agreed with a smile. Then he winked at Tiger's Mane, who was standing beside him. Immediately, 100 taels of silver were delivered to the eunuch's hands. The eunuch's eyes narrowed into slits as he smiled. As long as there were eunuchs in the palace, there was no one who did not know Yang Qindong. The diapers they were using now were supplied by him, which solved a big problem for them for many years, so they could be calm in any situation. In addition, the business of Immortal Abode and Outer Sky was booming. The eunuchs were full of curiosity and affection for Yang Shi. Not to mention other things, money was always the favorite thing of these people. In their eyes, it was impossible for them to have any descendants. What would they do when they were old? If they wanted others to serve them willingly, they needed money, the more the better. In their eyes, Yang Qindong was the biggest money tree, so no eunuch would be lazy if they had the chance to come in contact with him. Just like this time, who knew how many eunuchs were scrambling to do this task? And this person in front of him got what he wanted. He only had to make a trip and he received 100 taels of silver. How could he not be happy? The eunuch left happily. As he watched their silhouettes disappear, Hu Mang, who was at the side, came up to him. There was a hint of anger on his face as he said, "Young master, isn't it too much to give them 100 taels just like that? They are just doing their job. Hey, do you think the young master is still lacking money?" Yang Qindong shook his head unconcernedly. In his eyes, money was perhaps the most worthless thing. If he could use this to buy people's hearts, he didn't mind spending tens of thousands of gold. Only 100 taels of silver could earn him a reputation for being generous. In his eyes, this was completely worth it. Tiger's Mane, remember, don't underestimate anyone. Because as long as a person is used well, no matter how inconspicuous they usually are, they can play an extremely important role at a crucial time. Also, it's just spending a bit of money to make people work for us. No matter how you look at it, we're profiting. Using this matter, Yang Qindong taught his most trusted subordinate. Okay, in a while, you'll receive another 100,000 taels of silver. The intelligence system of the capital needs to be strengthened. I want to know what every important official is doing every day. I also want to know the power distribution of the eunuchs in the palace. I even want to know which concubine Zhu Qizhen favors and where he stayed last night. I want to know everything, understand? Yes. Tiger's Mane stood at attention and then turned to leave. He was well aware that the young master was advising him, as well as hammering him. It seemed like the development of the capital's Bureau of Security was still a little too slow. But it didn't matter. As long as there was enough money, there was nothing that couldn't be done, and there was no information that couldn't be gathered. The third princess was going to celebrate her birthday, and Yang Qindong was in charge of planning it. This matter spread like the wind through the imperial palace, through the imperial court, and even into the manners of the various officials. The reason even the families of the officials knew about it was because the emperor had invited all the daughters of the officials to the imperial palace on the same day and celebrate together. If one were to ask which young master or young master had the most influence in the hearts of the young ladies, if Yang Qindong was ranked second, no one would dare to be first. Even the current emperor, Zhu Qizhen, was slightly inferior. Zhu Qizhen already had Empress Qian and 2 official consorts in the harem. As for the other concubines, they were too numerous to count. Marrying the emperor was indeed glorious, but there were too many challenges to face. There were so many that these girls were worried that they would be eaten alive and spat out after entering the palace. In contrast, Yang Chendong was completely different. He didn't have a wife. Even if he had an official concubine, it was said that he only had Xiao Yin, the maid who warmed his bed, and Lady Shui, who threw herself into his arms. Even Lady Xiang, who was always by his side, was still a virgin. If they could marry Yang Chendong, given their background, they would naturally have a respected status, and that would mean that they would have endless money to spend. Moreover, this person was only 19 years old, and he was already a 5th-rank official. His future could be described as limitless. Not to mention that Yang Chendong was originally handsome and confident. Which girl wouldn't like him? When they heard that it was Dong Shui who planned the birthday banquet, the girls' minds became active. They all went to their parents and begged to be allowed to enter the palace on that day. Regarding this, the officials had their own opinions. To be able to become an official of the court, which one of them wasn't experienced? Which one of them hadn't experienced 81 difficulties to achieve success? Which one of them didn't spend their days trying to figure out the emperor's intentions and observing the situation of the court? Because of this, the officials could see that this wasn't a good job to begin with. It was very likely that the emperor had set a trap for Yang Chendong in order to find an opportunity to deal with him. As for what they could obtain after dealing with him, this wasn't something that the officials dared to guess. Since it was a trap, the officials naturally wouldn't allow their daughters' requests. This muddy water wasn't easy to wade in. The officials' reactions were almost the same. Naturally, this kind of matter would be noticed by the East faction guards. Someone immediately reported this matter to Zhu Qizhen. What? The officials don't agree? Humph. It's Shen's younger sister's birthday, how would they dare to disobey? Could it be that they are distressed over the small amount of gift money? Men, issue an edict. Tell all the officials in Zhen's name that all of their daughters must enter the palace on that day to celebrate Princess Shangda's birthday. Those who don't comply will be punished for defying the edict. Zhu Qizhen said with a face full of anger. Since he wanted to deal with Yang Chendong, it was naturally better to make it as big as possible. Taking the initiative to invite the daughters of the officials, how could Zhu Qizhen let go of such an opportunity to blow things up? He naturally had to carry it out. Not only that, he also imagined that when things went wrong, he would stand out and clean up the mess with the imperial family's reputation. In this way, even if the other officials pleaded for leniency, he would only ask for a fine of silver and not a change in his official position. The others wouldn't be able to say anything. Zhu Qizhen's edict reached the various residences. For a moment, everyone was in a state of chaos. It seemed that they wouldn't have the chance to avoid this muddy water even if they wanted to. Tell Yang Chendong to be careful. The Minister of Works, Shi Pu, said to his butler. This isn't an easy job. Tell him to be careful. The Minister of Revenue, Wang Zhua, pondered in his study. In the end, he still decided to remind Yang Chendong. Sigh, young people should still be cautious. How about this, Changning, you will personally make a trip. The Minister of Rights, Hu Shao, sighed in his study. This meant that he had already approved of the marriage between Yang Chendong and his granddaughter, Hu Yan. The Minister of Personnel, Wang Zhi, was even more direct. His grandson, Wang Si, directly left the capital and went to the Yang family manor. The 4 ministers, as well as the assistant ministers and officials below the 3rd rank, had sent people to remind Yang Chendong in various ways. They had also more or less received benefits from Yang Chendong in various aspects. If they were officials who had some friendship with Yang Chendong in the past, they would not be able to do anything. Chapter 117. This was the so-called aristocratic group. When something happened, it was natural for them to band together. Regardless of whether it was to help each other or because they were intimately interdependent, at least one-third of the officials in the capital participated in this matter and issued a kind warning to Yang Chendong. This time, even Wang Zhen sent a eunuch to warn him. He even personally sent Mao Mu, the eunuch of the ceremony supervisor, to the Yang family manor. Dong Shuai, eunuch Wang said that this time, the emperor is really angry and will definitely teach you a lesson. No matter how good the third princess birthday banquet is, he will still express his dissatisfaction. Mao Mu looked carefully at Yang Chendong. Because of Yang Chendong, Mao Mu was no longer the eunuch who was looked down upon by others. He had his own power and had a group of followers and a certain amount of power in the entire palace. Humans were like this. Before they had power, they might be able to live a peaceful life. But once they had power, they would only seek greater things and be more afraid of losing them. Mao Mu knew very well in his heart that he could be where he was today because of who gave him everything. He also knew that everything he had now was completely within the power of this person to take back. Because of this, his respect for Yang Chendong came from the bottom of his heart. It was the loyalty of a servant to his master. Knowing that his situation had long been tied to Dong Shuai's, Mao Mu spoke with a bit of caution and anxiety. When he spoke, he naturally considered it from Dong Shuai's point of view. Yang Chendong could sense Mao Mu's worry and anxiety, which made him feel very gratified. At the same time, he stepped forward and patted Mao Mu's shoulder. This young master knows all that you have said. But since it has already happened, what we need to think about now is how to change the situation and not escape from it. Do you understand? How about this, I'll help you with something. Yang Chendong smiled. At this moment, he was as confident as a general who commanded thousands of troops before a great war. As the third princess' birthday approached, the atmosphere in the entire imperial palace seemed to have become much more tense. However, unlike the others, Princess Changde, who was the protagonist, did not feel it at all. Instead, her face was filled with anticipation, looking forward to what kind of surprise Dong Shuai would bring her. Third princess, a eunuch called Mao Mu is looking for you. He said that the East Marshal has something important to discuss with you. You see. Her personal maid walked to Princess Changde's side and whispered into her ear. Dong Shuai is looking for me. Princess Changde's face was filled with astonishment. She could not understand why this Yang Chendong was looking for her when her birthday had not yet arrived. Yes, this eunuch Mao also said that if the princess doesn't agree to see him, she will definitely regret it. When the maidservant thought of the 100 taels of silver she had just received, she tried her best to put in a good word for Mao Mu. To be honest, it was just a eunuch who wanted to see the princess. She actually gave him 100 taels of silver as a reward. This silver was too easy to earn. The innocent third princess nodded curiously. Arrange for him to come in. But remember, don't let anyone else see him. Having been in the imperial palace since young, she naturally knew that it was difficult to keep any secrets here. Although eunuchs were everywhere in the imperial harem, this eunuch Mao was someone sent by the East Marshal. Naturally, he was different from others. Once he was discovered, who knew what kind of waves it would cause? Yes, princess. Don't worry, I will definitely not let anyone else see you. Afraid that her 100 taels of silver would fly away, the maidservant said with a resolute face. What would come in the end. Under the attention of many people, the third princess' birthday finally arrived. On this day, the imperial palace seemed to be much livelier. With the intention of making a big deal out of this matter, Zhu Qizhen deliberately made the entire imperial palace know about this matter. He also specially issued an edict that the eunuchs and maidservants of each palace, as long as they were not on duty, could come to join in the fun and see the difference and uniqueness between the East Marshal and others. In the morning, after the court, the daughters of the ministers began to line up to enter the imperial palace. From afar, the number of people was at least 500. This was because maids were not allowed to enter the imperial palace. Otherwise, there would be more people. But even so, with such influence and scale, it was likely that no matter what happened, it would be clearly known to all the officials. Yang Duo and Hu Yan were also in the crowd, lining up to enter the imperial palace. By right, Yang Duo was already married and was not qualified to attend the third princess banquet. But because she was a member of the Yang family, she was specially approved. At this time, she was walking together with Hu Yan, but no matter how one looked at it, the two of them looked a little anxious. The environment could affect a person. They were both born in the families of important ministers, so their sensitivity to some things was naturally incomparable to that of ordinary people. They could clearly feel that this banquet would not be a good one, and the wine would not be good. But compared to the other people who were more interested in watching the show, they were more worried about Yang Chendong. Although the matter between Hu Yan and Yang Chendong was not made public, as the seventh sister, Yang Duo naturally knew about it. When she saw that Hu Yan, who had always been playful and cute, was trembling nervously at the moment, she couldn't help but gently tug at her arm and said with a smile, "What's wrong? You haven't married yet, but you're already worried about your future husband?" Hu Yan, who was originally very nervous, immediately blushed when Yang Duo said this. "Seventh sister, could it be that you're not worried about Dong Shuai? My grandfather said that this time, it is clearly the emperor who is looking for trouble with Dong Shuai." How could Yang Duo not know the importance of this matter? Even at home, her husband, Wang Go, who had been well behaved for a while, recently jumped up again. Especially that evil mother-in-law, Yan Shi, who was full of sarcastic remarks. Looking at her attitude, it was as if her sixth brother had already been given the cold shoulder by the emperor. Although she said that she was worried, Yang Duo knew that this was not the time to panic. Otherwise, before the emperor did anything, Dong Shuai would have problems first. "Don't worry, could it be that you don't have any confidence in Dong Shuai?" "I have confidence, but this time, it is the emperor." Hu Yan still wanted to continue explaining. "It's good that you have confidence." Yang Duo directly interrupted. "Since you have confidence, then let's see how your Dong Shuai will create a miracle." Originally, Hu Yan's face was full of worry, but after hearing Yang Duo's words, she calmed down a lot for no reason. Then, her steps became much firmer. She was looking forward to Dong Shuai's wonderful performance in her heart. Compared to the nervousness of others, the main character, Yang Chendong, was very calm, at least on the surface. When the time came, he strode into the inner palace of the imperial city under the lead of a steward eunuch. This was also his first time here. His face was full of curiosity, looking left and right as if he was here for a vacation. This also caused the steward eunuch to be secretly amazed. Everyone said that Dong Shuai was very capable. Although he wasn't too clear, at least his ability to maintain his composure was incomparable to others. He still remembered the first time he entered the palace, his face was full of anxiety and nervousness. How could he dare to be as natural as Dong Shuai? Dong Shuai. The palace in front is where Princess Xianxia rests. Today's birthday banquet will also be held there. Seeing that they were almost there, the steward eunuch reminded Yang Chendong in a small voice. "Okay, thank you for your hard work." The corner of his mouth lifted slightly, revealing a confident smile. Like magic, he took out a large piece of silver from his sleeve and casually handed it over. This was the biggest piece of silver. One piece was worth 20 taels. After the steward eunuch took it in his hand, he smiled like a flower and said, "Then I wish Dong Shuai all the best." Good. Thank you for your auspicious words." Yang Chendong laughed heartily, then quickened his steps, as if he didn't know that there was a battlefield in front of him, and that there was some beautiful scenery waiting for him. Yang Chendong arrived, just an hour before the other daughters of the officials. This was also specially arranged by Zhu Qizhen. He didn't want to give Dong Shuai too much time to react and watch him make a fool of himself. After rushing to Princess Shangda's palace, Yang Chendong saw the main character of today's banquet, the third princess. When the gorgeously dressed third princess saw Yang Chendong, her face revealed an unnoticeable smile, then she went forward to greet him generously, giving others the feeling that it was the first time they had met. In fact, this was also the first time the two of them had officially met, but in private, they had been friends for a long time. Yang Chendong greets Princess Shangda. Long live the princess. After saying this, Yang Chendong was about to kneel on the ground. Instead, it was the third princess who stepped forward and said, Yang Shima, you don't have to be so polite. You still have to work hard today. Yang Chendong, who didn't kneel, raised his head to look carefully at the third princess. He found that this girl was indeed very beautiful, and her skin was also very good. However, those eyes of hers seemed to be moving too quickly, giving people the feeling that she was too mischievous. Thinking that this was only a girl who had just turned 14 years old, and that playfulness was in her nature, Yang Chendong didn't want to dwell on this matter. Instead, he lowered his head and replied respectfully, in reply to the princess, it's not hard for this official to work for His Majesty and the princess. Oh right, in a while, this official will arrange for some people and things to be brought into the palace. I hope the princess can make things convenient. Of course. This princess has already made the arrangements. Yang Shima, please rest assured. The third princess smiled and nodded in agreement. Since everything was left to Yang Chendong to arrange, then of course the people and things he prepared would be brought into the palace. Otherwise, what kind of tricks could a man like him come up with? After a simple greeting, Yang Chendong walked around the palace accompanied by a few eunuchs. He needed to take care of the environment and find a good spot. At least, he would know how to place the things and people he had arranged when they arrived. You're tuning in to the UnparalleledSwordWill YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.